Imagine, the year is 1587 and you're leaving your starving family in a foreign land to gather supplies and food across the Atlantic. The journey there and back will take many months and a safe return is not certain. This image is very troublesome, as you can imagine. Now imagine, after many months of treacherous travel, returning home to find no sign of your people or your family. In fact, the only sign that people were ever there are two words carved into a tree and a post nearby. National Geographic author Willie Dyer details this real-life account of John White when he returned home to Roanoke in 1587 in his article, America's Lost Colony: Can the New Dig Solve the Mystery? After considerable research, I have evaluated the various factors and theories that could explain what happened to the people of Roanoke. The disappearance of the colony of Roanoke is still a mystery to this day. Despite the first initial failed attempt to colonize and various factors stacked against the group, experts can only theorize about what had happened. The first attempt to colonize Roanoke would certainly foreshadow the disastrous fate of the people. The second attempt to colonize resulted in a sudden disappearance, which is still a mystery to this day. While there are many different factors that could have led to the disappearance of the people, experts can only theorize about what may have happened. So now, before we dig into the mystery of Roanoke, I'd like to cover the first initial attempt to colonize. The rough beginning of the colony of Roanoke certainly foreshadowed the unfortunate fate of the people. A review of A Kingdom Strange, the brief and tragic history of the lost colony of Roanoke by historical author and professor Barry Steinford details the struggles that the group initially faced. Located here on this map, near modern-day Outer Banks, North Carolina, lays the colony of the first English-American colony of Roanoke. In 1585, Queen Elizabeth sent Sir Walter Raleigh and a crew of about 100 men to attempt to colonize the island. Initially, things went well. They established relations with the natives and attempted to make the island their home. However, over time, tensions with the natives became very dangerous and supplies grew short. When Sir Francis Drake was on his way home to England, he stopped by the island. The weakened colony convinced the reluctant Raleigh to return home and abandon mission. They did leave 15 men behind to hold the island, but the disastrous first attempt to colonize the island certainly would foreshadow what would happen 2 years later when they attempted again. Now that I've covered the initial attempt to colonize the island, I'll elaborate on the second attempt and its disastrous fate. The second attempt resulted in a sudden disappearance of more than 100 people, which is still a mystery hundreds of years later. Accredited author Willie Dyer also explains what occurred when the colony attempted to reestablish in July of 1587. The new Roanoke governor, John White, brought over 100 men, women, and children to attempt to colonize the island a second time. Upon arrival, they did find most of the 15 skeletons of the men left behind before, thought to have been killed by natives. Regardless of all these different factors stacked against the group, they did attempt to make Roanoke their home once again. Sadly, over time, supplies grew short once again, and tensions with the natives were very intense. John White had no choice but to return to England to gather more food and supplies to help save his people. Now, he intended this trip to be short and come there and back. However, the Spanish War caused a major delay in his return home. Almost 2 years later, in August of 1590, he returned home devastatingly to find no trace of any of the people he left behind. In fact, the only sign that people were ever there in the first place were two words carved onto a tree and a post, as depicted in this picture. They said Croatan and CRO mysteriously. Now, John White was led to believe that those words were a sign that his people traveled to a nearby Croatan island, which you can see is just a short distance from Roanoke. However, a massive storm forced his crew to return home to England, and he was never able to search for his people, and he never found out what happened to his family. So now that I've covered these two failed attempts to colonize the island and the mysterious disappearance, I'll elaborate on some theories attempting to explain what happened. While the mystery may never be solved, there are many theories formulated by experts attempting to explain what happened. Despite continuous searching, hundreds of years later, there are no solid facts that point to exactly what happened to these people. So Willie Dyer also provides some widely accepted theories on what happened to the people, such as they starved to death or possibly drowned. Other people believed that they traveled further west to try to find some friendly natives, and they eventually married into some tribes. Another explanation is that they could have possibly been killed by local natives or the Spanish from the nearby Florida. Even more interesting, Dyer provides some information on the first colony foundation, which was formulated to try to put the pieces together of the mystery and figure out what happened. This group has searched the land and they found some tools and artifacts, but nothing explains exactly what happened to the people. Phil Evans, a founder of the group, has found some erosion around the land, which has led him and some others to believe that the island or the colony actually eroded into the ocean. Another interesting explanation is by senior editor at the National Wildlife magazine, Laura Tangley, and she offers an alternative explanation in her article, The Lost Colony Theory. She explains that scientists now believe that the colonists died off due to one of the worst droughts in hundreds of years. They came to this explanation based on studying 800-year-old tree rings, which has led them to believe that there was a massive drought during this time. While all these theories are all widely debated, none of them offer a solid fact that explain exactly what happened between 1587 to 1590. So in conclusion, the devastating fate of the people of Roanoke definitely was foreshadowed by the first failed attempt to colonize. The eerie disappearance of more than 100 people from the second attempt is still a historical mystery to this day. Despite many theories created by experts, the answer may never be solved. From the start, the people of Roanoke had various factors stacked against them, which resulted in 2 failed attempts to colonize and a mysterious disappearance of an entire colony, which is still unexplained. So even if the mystery is never solved, Roanoke is a special piece of history that sparks infinite curiosity, as Phil Evans captures the true importance of Roanoke when he says, "As long as the lost colony is unexplained, it stays fascinating for a lot of people. I don't want to take away the mystery. That's what makes it exciting."